I lose another digit. Effie and Bert were real nice, and I even liked their little cockapoo, Queen's Head. They lived in Nanaimo and hadn't been fortunate enough to have children. They had been too old to adopt and hadn't even had much luck getting their hands on a foster child until me. Although I was happy to provide them with some measure of happiness, it wasn't home, and after a while, I was restless beyond belief. They never asked me to confide in them, but after 2 weeks, I knew what a strain this must have been for Abby. So one day I sat them down and laid out the whole story, most of which you already know, except for the part that finally landed me with Abby and Bert. So I finished up after an hour, as eyes glued to me. They rocked in their rocking chairs and fed Queen's Head niblets of chopped up steak absentmindedly from a bowl in Abby's lap. Uncle Jack got me a net, and I would go down to the docks to wait and watch for a whale to bring my parents in. Everyone left me alone because it looked like I was fishing, and they were used to kids down there trying to scoop up fish for the mink farm. Occasionally, of course, I would have to catch a fish. Occasionally, she would have to catch a fish to make her more believable, interrupted Abby, turning to Bert. I was used to this by then. Abby liked to interrupt things for Bert, which wasn't because Bert wasn't smart. It was just her way. That and fussing around him, running in little circles like Quincy had when he wanted out. Right, I said. More believable. But anyhow, one day I was lying there face down on the dock. You must have been on your stomach, said Abby, her face crinkling in excitement. I couldn't figure out how old Abby was. She had deep wrinkles, crevices really, and flame red dyed hair. Both she and Bert were short and round. I was almost as tall as they were, especially when Abby took off the high heels she wore all the time, even with pants. She had constantly surprised eyes, which at first made you feel flattered that you were saying so many amazing things until you realized you weren't. Because of their rounded middles and short bodies, Effie and Bert looked like a couple of kindly old hard-boiled eggs. I continued. I was on my stomach, and I was watching the waves coming slopping by, wave after wave after wave after wave after wave. I had been lying there for a long time. Now, how long would you say that was, Primrose? Said Bert, who always liked to get his facts straight. She doesn't know. She was hypnotized by those waves, weren't you, Primrose? Well, yes, I was, I said. Uh-huh. I could tell. She was hypnotized by those waves, Bert. Ah, said Bert, nodding affably. So she had no track of time, said Abby. No, I didn't, I said. And then this strange thing happened. I began to feel like I was a wave too, and a fish. I looked up to see how they were taking this. Just like Abby's bee sting, cried Bert. It is. Forevermore, it is. It's my bee sting all over again, ain't it, Bert? Said Abby, popping up onto her short legs in excitement. It sure is, honey bun, said Bert. You see, I was sitting here in this very chair one day, and Abby was out sunning on the lawn when suddenly she goes crashing through the door and passes out on the very floor, on that very floor. Right here, said Abby, walking over and marking the spot with the toe of her high heel. I was stone cold scared. Never been so scared in all my livelong days. I called 911 and they sent an ambulance quick but I thought I was losing her. She was so cold and her heart was so slow. You were losing me, Bert, said Abby. I was nearly done away. What happened? I asked. I had been stung by a bee, and as I came through the door, I just had time to yell, Bert, I was stung, before going into anaphylactic shock. Of course, we didn't know what it was called until later when we woke up with all these medicals hanging on my every word. But Bert had the good sense to tell the ambulance man that that's what I said, and they said the pressure was going down and they were losing me. I cried like a baby, said Bert. Anyway, this isn't important to you. The part that reminds me is that I told Bert later that as I was sinking into the big sleep, I had this sudden feeling that, we think we are all separate. But you know what? We are not. We are all connected. The birds and leaves and wind and everything. We are all one thing. Also, it was very relaxing. You remember me saying that, Bert? I remember, said Bert. Abby is a very relaxed person anyway. Not like that. I never had relaxation that good. That was deep relaxation, Bert. I was floating. I was a bird. I was the sky. Abby's voice drifted off into pleasant reveries. Exactly, I said. So I was kind of observed and leaned down to look deeper into the water when a big wave washed over me, knocking me off balance. I fell off the dock. I had the net in one hand and it got wrapped around my wrist. My fingers twisted in the netting, and the whole thing hooked over the dock post, a- attaching me by one arm to the dock. The waves swept me up and down and in and over until I couldn't tell where there was water and where there was air, and I thought I was going to drown, pulled to pieces by the sea. And then she's never find out what happened to her sweaters, Bert, Abby said, poking Bert, who sometimes drifted off in his rocker. A fisherman on shore saw me and yelled, and a bunch of men came running and untangled me and got me back onto the dock. My hand was all mangled, and I remember thinking it's another little trip to the hospital for me. That's where I lost the tip of this ring finger, I said, holding up my left hand with the missing fingertip. While I was in the hospital, Miss Honecker gave Child Protective Services a whole file about me, saying she didn't think I was being well supervised. I had lost a toe and a part of a finger in Uncle Jack's care, and they sent me down here while they reviewed things. Well, I hoped your Uncle Jack didn't give Miss Honecker a good price on that townhouse, said Abby. She had already signed the papers to buy it at cost the day after we met her in the restaurant, so he couldn't take it back, and he was mad as a hornet. He accused her of getting rid of me for her own purposes, and she said, "And what would those be, Mr. Dion?" He couldn't very well say to snare him without sounding like a conceited fool, so he just stormed around and spluttered. I guess she's kind of given up on him though, because she used to call him Jack. Anyhow, she claimed to have nothing but my welfare at heart, and maybe she does because after all she is bred to the nobility, so she has to do the right thing no matter what. I told Uncle Jack that I thought since she was raised in boarding schools, she probably didn't think anything of sending a child away from her home if she thought it was in the best interest of the child. Uncle Jack said she was a cold, cold fish, but I get glimpses of a good heart sometimes, like when she talks about her sister or all those deathbed visits she makes. Well, I think she's just a big cheater, said Evie. Well, anyhow, you can see that none of it was Uncle Jack's fault. We can see that, said Bert. Sure, we can see that, said Abby. So we hoped you get to go back to Coal Harbor even though we would miss you, said Bert. Bert, you've been like a daughter to us, said Abby, holding up the sweater she was knitting for me against my back to see if it would fit. Better than a daughter if you ask me, said Bert. Sure, because what Bert means is that we'd already know our flesh and blood daughters' stories, but you got stories we never heard. You are more entertaining than a flesh and blood daughter, said Bert. Which we never could have, said Evie. Well, it's too bad about that, I said. You miss your home, don't you? said Evie. Asked Evie. I started to cry. I knew my parents were coming home someday, but in the meantime, I did miss my home. Not my home with Uncle Jack, nice as he was, but my own home with the sound of my mother's footsteps in the morning as I lay still in bed, and the sound of my father's coming up the front walk at night. Abby cried too, saying she missed the child that had never been born. I had been eating butterscotch chow mein noodle cookies, recipe to follow, steadily since getting home from school and suddenly regretted the last 8 or 9. But I am not miserable all the time, I snuffled some time later when I could breathe. We had gone through most of a box of Kleenex. Sometimes I get these bursts of joy. Me too, sobbed Abby. You can be sunk low as a skunk and still have a joy in your heart. Joy just lives like one of those spinning things. What's they called, Bert? Gyroscope. Gyroscope, said Bert. He always knows what I mean. Gyroscope in your chest. It don't seem to have any connection to circumstance, good or bad. Have a mint. She was always passing out mints. Ain't it the truth? Said Bert, who had been very helpful, holding the tissue box. I know, said Evie, hopping up and down on her high heels. Let's go to that restaurant you liked so much. What's it called? The Girl on the Red Swing? I said. Sure, why not? What do you say, Bert? She asked. Chinese is my favorite, said Bert. We've been to every Chinese restaurant in Europe, interrupted Abby excitedly. The Paris Chinese restaurants. They got nothing on the ones in Italy, but you know where you find the very best? China, I ventured. China isn't in Europe, honey. London. Gosh, they got great Chinese restaurants in London, don't they, Bert? Said Abby. They probably do have the best Chinese restaurants in China, said Bert. But they probably don't call them Chinese there. No one in China says, let's go out for Chinese food, said Abby. They just say, let's go out or let's go eat, said Bert. Well, that girl on the red swing isn't Chinese, I said doubtfully. Don't you worry about that, said Abby. We'll take Queen's ahead. I don't know if Miss Bowser allows dogs in the restaurant, I said. Oh, Quincy has real nice and quiet. I'll just keep him in my lap and feed him scraps under my napkin. We did that on our trip down to Arizona, didn't we, Bert? Uh-huh, said Bert. You really travel a lot, I said. We like it, said Evie. Keeps us young, said Bert. And she's gotta go home, Bert, said Evie. If only just to see the place. Oh, I know, said Bert. She don't even know what happened to her sweaters, said Abby. I followed Abby up to her room and watched as she began packing an overnight case. We'll leave in the morning. We'll stay in a motel. We won't put no one out that way. We'll probably have to stay. You will probably have to stay with us, honey, seeing as how you are a ward of the province these days. But we'll take you to see your Uncle Jack and everything will be fine. And of course, eventually she was right.